Nathan Cole had always believed that life could be controlled if he simply held the reins tightly enough. His world was a fortress of logic, numbers, polished reports, impenetrable routines, and the cold confidence that came from leading a corporation whose value climbed the stock market like a vine clinging to a steel tower. He had never feared anything that could be measured on a spreadsheet, never trembled at the whispers of uncertainty, never let his heart dictate the pace of his life. Until the night he saw her again. The restaurant was a cathedral of glass and candlelight, a place where wealthy patrons spoke softly to maintain the illusion of refinement. Servers glided like shadows, balancing plates worth more than an average week's salary. Nathan was a man who belonged in such an environment, at least on the surface, with his tailored suit, his composed stare, his reputation that preceded him into every room he entered. Yet that night, he felt like an intruder in his own life. He kept rolling the stem of his glass between his fingers, not drinking, not breathing deeply, simply waiting for a blind date that he already regretted. Jason had pushed him into it, insisting that he needed someone gentle, someone who lived outside the noise of corporate ambition, someone whose presence soothed rather than sharpened. He was still thinking of excuses to leave when the room shifted. The entrance doors opened, letting in a soft breath of winter air, and Nathan's world, as he had spent years constructing it, tilted. A woman stepped inside, smoothing the skirt of a simple, second-hand navy dress. Her blonde hair fell in loose waves, pinned back with humble care. Her posture carried exhaustion beneath its grace, the kind that only came from years of holding an entire world alone. He recognized her instantly. The past thundered into him with the force of an avalanche. Years collapsed into a single, impossible moment. He saw the girl who once sat under oak branches with him, threading hope into every stitch of a tiny blue handkerchief. He saw the smile that had carried him through the loneliness of those formative years. He saw the pain that appeared at the edge of that summer, the fear she hid, the trembling goodbye she never gave because she never said anything at all. Leah Hart. He stood without realizing it. She froze mid-step, her breath catching the same way his had. For a moment, the restaurant melted into silence, the candle flames wavering like they understood the gravity of what was happening. She approached slowly, hesitantly, as if unsure whether her own mind could be trusted. "Mr. Cole," she whispered. Her voice, fragile yet familiar, struck something deep inside him. She thought he was a client, a stranger, just another wealthy man who needed something from her, something small and forgettable. "It is me," he said softly, "Nathan." Disbelief washed over her features. Her fingers trembled where they curled around the back of the empty chair. Her lips parted, forming his name breathlessly, like she had swallowed the memory of him for far too long and was unprepared to let it surface again. The intervals between heartbeats stretched into eternity. "I had no idea," she whispered. "I would never have shown up if I knew it was you." The words struck him like a blade wrapped in sorrow. She was thinner now. Her cheeks carried shadows beneath them. Her eyes held a kind of guarded sadness that did not belong to the girl he remembered. Her modest dress was neat but worn. Her shoes looked like they had traveled too far on too little. He saw every suffering she tried to hide in a single glance. "Why did you leave?" he asked quietly. A tremor rippled through her. "I did not have a choice," she whispered, already stepping back, her eyes glimmering with old wounds resurfacing. "And you do not know the feeling of a girl who lost everything with no one left in this world." Her voice cracked at the end. Nathan reached for her arm instinctively, but she pulled away as though his touch might unravel her. Without another word, she turned. Her heels echoed on marble like the fading trace of a ghost. Before he could call her name, she was already gone, swallowed by the winter air beyond the glass doors. He stood frozen, breath shallow, hands numb, realizing she had walked away from him twice now, once when they were young and again tonight. Only now, he finally felt the weight of the disappearance. Later, in the solitude of his penthouse, Nathan opened the drawer that he never allowed anyone to touch. Dust lay lightly across its surface. Inside it rested the delicate blue handkerchief she had made for him as a teenager. Faint stitches in the corner bore his initials. The threads had worn over time, but the sentiment remained intact. She had crafted it with the innocence of someone who believed in a shared future. He pressed the cloth to his face, breathing in its faint, nostalgic scent, and something inside him cracked. He did not understand why fate had returned her to him only to rip her away again. But he knew one truth with unshakable certainty. She had not been lying when she said she lost everything. Meanwhile, in a tiny apartment across the city, Leia stood in a doorway with her daughter Lucy clinging to her neck. The child's little pink dress hugged her body, the fabric thinning from too many washes. Leia whispered softly into her hair, promising she was fine, pretending it did not hurt to breathe, pretending she had not been broken all over again at the sight of a man she once loved more than her own life. But Lucy was too perceptive. Children always were. She made drawings of them, two stick figures holding hands, a child between them, the son smiling with simple joy. Leia carefully tucked the drawing into a book so she would not cry in front of her daughter. Later that night, when the apartment fell quiet and Lucy slept peacefully at her side, Leia stared at the cracked ceiling, her heart aching from memories she had fought to bury. Nathan had looked at her tonight as if she still mattered. And that terrified her more than anything. Days passed in restless tension. Nathan attempted to forget her but failed miserably. He found her name in Victoria's household records and learned the truth, that Leia was a nanny working tirelessly for someone who praised her dedication, who mentioned her working a second job at a diner to support her daughter. Her daughter. That was the detail that lodged itself beneath Nathan's ribs and refused to move. He spent long hours in his office staring at that single line, wondering how many years of her life he had missed, wondering if she had faced every hardship alone, wondering why she thought she needed to protect him by disappearing. He could not erase the image of her standing in that restaurant, fragile yet brave, worn down yet determined. He wanted answers, closure, something to piece together all the missing pages between their shared past and painful present. And then he saw her again. A chance encounter in a small, humble cafe where she carried a tray with delicate hands that trembled slightly under the weight of steaming cups. She tried not to look at him, but fate had stopped pretending impartiality long ago. She placed his drink down with grace he did not deserve. "Thank you," he said quietly. She nodded, eyes lowering immediately, as if afraid of being seen for too long. Nathan left a business card and a letter folded neatly. Not a plea, not a demand, just a quiet message offering shelter, support, a place to breathe, without judgment, without cost, without obligation. He wasn't sure she would ever read it. He wasn't sure she would ever call. But as he stepped out into the city wind, he felt the faintest pull of something he had lost long ago: hope. Yet the world was not done testing them. By the time night fell, the universe unraveled what little stability she had left. Lucy grew feverish. Leia lost her second job. She received notice that her rent was overdue. The world pushed her toward breaking, but she held Lucy tighter, whispering promises through trembling hands. When she took Lucy to a clinic, they turned her away because there was no space, because she had no insurance, because sometimes life ignored cries for help until they cracked open. She sat in the rain under the awning of a closed bookstore, holding her feverish daughter, whispering prayers into the storm, wishing someone, anyone, could see how hard she was trying. And fate, for once, did not look away. Headlights shimmered across the wet pavement. Someone approached. She shielded Lucy instinctively, heart pounding. Then she heard his voice. "Leia." She lifted her head. It was him. The rain softened overnight, leaving the city washed in a muted silver haze. the kind that blurred edges and softened even the harshest streets. Nathan woke long before dawn, unable to chase sleep back into the corners of the room. He moved quietly through the penthouse, each step measured, each breath heavy with questions he could not voice. The empty hallway echoed faintly, reminding him that moments earlier, Leia and her daughter had been curled on the couch, small, fragile presences in a world too sharp for softness. Now the sun rose, faint and pale, and he found himself standing near the doorway of the guest room. He leaned quietly against the frame, watching Leia through the narrow gap she had left open. She lay curled on her side, her golden hair unpinned and falling loosely across the pillow. Her daughter rested against her chest, her small hands gripping her mother's shirt even in sleep, as if afraid that letting go would invite the darkness back in. For a man who had spent years believing he was beyond emotion, Nathan felt something he had no name for. He watched the slow rise and fall of Leia's shoulders, the steady rhythm of her breath, and wondered how the world had allowed someone like her to struggle alone. The thought tightened something inside him, something raw and haunting. He rubbed a hand over his jaw and exhaled slowly, as if trying to loosen the ache that had settled deep inside. He had built his life around control, precision, and forward motion. But standing there, he felt captured by something quieter, something far more dangerous. He stepped back so quietly that the floor did not even whisper beneath his feet, and he retreated to the kitchen where he boiled water, the steam rising in ghostly spirals. The day stretched on with an uneasy stillness. Leia woke with a soft gasp, her hand immediately checking her daughter's forehead. The fever had lowered slightly, leaving the girl sleepy but responsive. Leia held her tightly, her fingers trembling with relief. She stepped into the hallway, brushing her hair back as she murmured softly, hopping not to disturb anything in a place that felt too elegant to breathe in. Nathan watched her from the window reflection as she stood at the counter pouring warm milk into a cup. She did not realize he was awake, nor how quietly he moved when he approached her. When she turned and saw him, her eyes widened for a second before softening into something he could not decipher. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely a thread of sound. "For last night, for the clinic, for everything." Nathan nodded slowly. "You do not have to thank me." "I do," she replied, a fragile conviction shaping her words. "No one has helped me in a long time." He held her gaze, unsettled by the honesty in her expression. He wanted to ask why. He wanted to ask 1,000 questions, but the fear of breaking her, of pressing too deeply into the wounds she carried, held him silent. She took a seat at the kitchen table, her daughter curled on her lap, drifting in and out of sleep. The child's tiny fingers curled into her mother's blouse, seeking warmth and reassurance. Leia stroked her hair gently, her expression softening with each small movement. The sight struck Nathan with a force he had not anticipated. There was something sacred in their closeness, something grounding and painful and beautiful all at once. Hours passed in a quiet rhythm. Nathan stepped in only when necessary, offering food, blankets, and space without suffocating her. He had spent enough time reading people to know when to stay close and when to disappear into the shadows of a room. Late afternoon approached, and a hush settled over the penthouse. Leia sat near the window, her daughter asleep against her shoulder. The muted city stretched far below them, a quilt of lights and motion that seemed too large for the small breath between them. Nathan stepped closer but did not sit. He watched the snow drifting softly outside, each flake a fragile thing that somehow survived the fall. Leia kept her eyes on the skyline, but her voice broke the quiet. "I never meant to cross your path again," she murmured. "I wanted you to have the life you deserved." Nathan inhaled quietly. "And what life did you think I deserved?" "One without me." Her words trembled. "One without my burdens, one without my mistakes." He turned fully toward her, his jaw tightening as he tried to understand the exhaustion beneath her confession. She looked at him then, really looked, and for the first time he saw not strength, not resilience, but fear. A deep, quiet fear that she carried like a shadow. "You left without a word," he said softly. "I wondered for years if I ever meant anything to you." Her breath hitched. "You meant everything, that is why I had to go." He took a step closer, his voice low. "You should have let me choose." She shook her head. "I was drowning, Nathan. You cannot ask a drowning person to think clearly. All they know is that they are pulling someone else under." He wanted to argue, but her voice was too raw, too honest. The doorway chimed faintly as a delivery arrived downstairs. Nathan stepped away, tension rippling through him. He hated how powerless he felt in moments like these, when words failed and the past tightened its grip around both their throats. When evening settled in, the penthouse lights glowed softly, warming the space with golden hues. Leia tucked her daughter into the guest bed, smoothing the blankets over her small form. She lingered, brushing a hand across the girl's cheek before stepping into the hallway. Nathan stood near the living room, hands in his pockets, staring at the floor as though searching for something he had lost there years ago. Leia joined him hesitantly, her presence so light he barely sensed her until she spoke. "You heard part of my conversation that night," she said quietly. "You heard my fears, but not the truth." He lifted his head. "Tell me then." She swallowed, her voice softer than the glow of the room. "I loved you. I loved you so much that I didn't know how to hold all of it. When my mother died, everything fell apart. I lost the house. My father became violent. I was scared and ashamed. And when I found out about the baby, I thought I had already failed." Nathan's brows drew together. "You never failed." She shook her head. "I did not want you to see me like that, to see everything broken. I thought leaving would protect you." "It did not," he said quietly. "It destroyed me." The silence between them thickened. She blinked fast, swallowing the edge of something sharp. Nathan did not step closer this time. He knew she needed space. He simply stood there, offering presence without pressure. When she lifted her gaze again, her expression had softened, almost fragile. "I never forgot you," she whispered. "Not once." The admission struck him like a blow he had waited years for. The room around them shifted as though holding its breath. He opened his mouth to answer, but before he could speak, a knock sounded at the penthouse door. A sharp, unexpected sound that cracked the moment in half. Nathan approached slowly, checking the security screen before unlocking the door. On the other side stood Jason, his best friend and the reason the blind date had ever happened. He wore a casual coat dusted with snow, his expression apologetic. "Sorry for dropping by unannounced. Something came up." Nathan nodded for him to step inside. Leia instinctively retreated to the side, not wanting to intrude or draw attention. Jason glanced around, curious, until his eyes fell on her. "Oh, I did not realize you had company." Nathan exhaled faintly. "This is Leia." Jason's eyebrows lifted in recognition, but he said nothing. Instead, he turned back to Nathan, voice low. "There has been a leak in your corporate office. Someone accessed employee files, internal logs, and personal contracts. Someone with a chip on their shoulder." Nathan's expression hardened. "Competitor." "No," Jason whispered. "Mark." Leia's breath faltered. Her heart thudded painfully against her ribs. Jason continued. "He was emailing journalists, claiming he's the father of your child, that she's living in your home, that you're hiding them, trying to start another scandal." Leia's knees weakened at the implication. Her daughter caught in a lie she never invited. Nathan stepped between them instinctively, as if shielding her from the weight of the words. "He doesn't care about her," Leia whispered, her voice tight with emotion. "He only wants money." Nathan nodded slowly. "And he is not getting anywhere near either of you." Jason handed Nathan a folder containing printed emails, evidence, and time-stamped logs. Nathan flipped through them, each line tightening the coil of rage inside him. "You'll want your attorneys involved," Jason said. "This is personal." Nathan closed the folder with a controlled breath. "I know." When Jason left, The silence settled once again. Leia stood at the edge of the room, arms wrapped around herself. "I am sorry," she whispered. "I never wanted your life mixed with mine like this. I never wanted to bring trouble to your door." Nathan walked toward her slowly, each step deliberate. "You think you brought trouble," he said quietly, "but all you brought was truth." She looked away. Truth does not feed a child. Truth does not pay rent. "No," he agreed softly, "but lies destroy people, and I will not let lies destroy you or her." She swallowed, her voice trembling. "Why?" He stopped in front of her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. "Because I see you," he whispered. "Because I still care. Because I cannot watch you do this alone anymore." Her breath quivered. She looked at him, eyes shimmering with doubt she had carried for years. "You should not rescue me," she whispered. He shook his head. "I am not rescuing you. I am choosing you." The words seemed to fill the room, warm and overwhelming. Her fingers brushed her lips, trembling. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then he stepped back, giving her space to breathe, to exist, to rebuild whatever parts of herself she thought were too broken to offer anyone else. That night, while the city breathed below them, Leia found herself standing near the window once more, staring at the drifting snow. Nathan approached quietly, but he did not speak, simply standing beside her. "I am scared," she whispered. "So am I," he replied. It was the first time she realized she was no longer the only fragile soul in the room. The night deepened, but neither stepped away, and for the first time in years the quiet did not feel empty. It felt like the beginning of something new. The days that followed unfolded in a rhythm neither of them expected, gentle in moments, tense in others, like a fragile song trying to remember its melody after too many seasons of silence. Nathan worked from home more than usual, which alone startled his staff. He claimed he needed quiet. He claimed he needed focus. He claimed 100 reasons, none of which revealed the truth. He wanted to remain close enough to hear Leia's footsteps down the hall, to catch Lucy's sleepy laughter drifting from the guest room, to feel the faint reminder that a life long forgotten was finding its way back to him. Leia tried to keep to herself, moving through the penthouse with careful, almost apologetic steps. She cleaned dishes not hers, folded blankets she had not used, straightened pillows that did not belong to her. It was not duty but instinct, the way a person tries to earn space in a world they do not believe they deserve. One morning, she stood in front of the stove preparing oatmeal for Lucy, her hair loosely braided over one shoulder. Nathan entered quietly, wearing a soft sweater instead of his usual pressed suit. She nearly dropped the spoon in surprise. "I did not know you were awake," she said softly. "I have been awake a while," he said, leaning against the counter. "I heard someone moving around in my kitchen." Leia flushed. "I can stop. I just thought I could make breakfast before you left for work." He shook his head. "No one has cooked in this kitchen in years. It feels different, in a good way." Her cheeks reddened. She kept stirring the pot, her motions tender and precise. The warm scent of cinnamon filled the room. Lucy sat at the table swinging her small feet, her pink dress slightly rumpled from sleep. When Nathan placed a glass of juice in front of her, she peered up at him with wide eyes before whispering a shy thank you. It softened him in a way he did not expect. Later that afternoon, Nathan returned from a meeting earlier than planned. He stepped inside to find sunlight spilling across the living room floor in soft golden sheets. Leia sat cross-legged on the couch, coloring with Lucy. Their heads bent together, the crayons scattered across the table, the girls' laughter ringing like a small bell in the quiet home. He watched them unseen, absorbing the gentle curve of Leia's smile, the warmth in her expression as she guided Lucy's hand across the page. They looked like a memory he might have dreamed once, long before the world hardened around him. It frightened him, it comforted him, it made him want things he'd forgotten how to want. Days turned into weeks. The restraining order against Mark went through quietly, efficiently, handled by lawyers who owed Nathan far too many favors. He only told Leah after it had been approved, sparing her the agony of waiting. Her hands trembled when she read the document, her breath catching as though someone had finally lifted a weight pressing against her ribs for years. "You did not have to do this," she whispered. "I know," he said, "but I wanted to." She blinked, tears glazing her eyes before she forced them away. "I do not know how to thank you." "You already have." She looked confused. He did not clarify. One evening, winter winds pressed against the glass windows as though trying to enter. Nathan arrived home exhausted, shoulders tight with strain. He loosened his coat and stepped into the living room only to freeze. Leah sat at the piano. He did not know she played. Her fingers moved slowly across the keys, uncertain at first, then growing steadier as she followed a melody she had once known by heart. Lucy sat beside her, humming softly, a blanket draped around her shoulders like a cape. The melody was one Nathan recognized, though faintly. It was the tune she used to hum under the old oak tree, back when sunlight filtered through leaves and time felt endless. He took a slow breath, afraid to interrupt, but Leah noticed him in the reflection of the glossy piano surface. Her hand stilled. "I am sorry," she murmured. "I should not use your piano without asking." "It is not that," he said quietly. "I just forgot how beautiful that song was." Her expression softened with something he could not name. She slid aside slightly as if inviting him to sit. He hesitated, but Lucy tugged his sleeve. "Come listen with us," she said. It was the first time she had ever asked him for anything. He sat. The three of them crowded onto the bench, the melody flowing once more, quiet and gentle, filling the luxurious penthouse with a warmth no amount of money had ever managed to create. Winter deepened. Snow layered itself across the city in soft, forgiving blankets, muting the sharpness of the skyline. Leah spent more time in the penthouse, though she remained cautious, unsure of how long she was permitted to stay in a world that felt too stable, too warm, too impossible for someone like her. She still searched for apartments. She still browsed childcare listings. She still folded her clothes each morning as though preparing to leave. Nathan noticed every one of these things, though he spoke little of them. He had learned long ago that forcing people to stay often pushed them further away. But one evening, he returned home to find her seated at the dining table surrounded by open laptop screens and scattered papers. Her hair was disheveled, her eyes tired, and her hands gripped her head as though trying to hold it together. "What is wrong?" he asked softly. She shook her head quickly, embarrassed. "Nothing, just paperwork for housing programs, waiting lists, requirements. None of it is working." "Let me help." "No," she said immediately, almost too sharply. "You have done enough. I cannot let you fix this." "I am not fixing it. I am supporting you." She looked at him then, with a mix of fear and longing, as if she wanted to believe him but did not dare. "I am afraid," she whispered. "Of me." She shook her head. "Of hope." Nathan sat across from her, his expression gentle. "Hope is not something you run from, Leah." Her voice cracked. "Every time I have hoped for anything, I lost it. My mother, my home, my chance at school, my chance at love, everything disappears." He inhaled sharply, the last two words hitting him like a physical blow. She flinched, realizing what she had said. Their eyes locked in a stillness that stretched painfully between them. He reached across the table, not touching her hand but placing his own near hers. "You did not lose love," he said quietly. "You walked away from it, and I understand why now, but I never stopped wanting it back." Her breath trembled. "Nathan, please, do not say things like that unless you mean them." He leaned forward just slightly. "I have never meant anything more." Tears spilled down her cheeks despite her efforts to hold them back. She stood abruptly, needing air, needing space. She went to the balcony and stepped into the cold, her breath forming soft clouds in the night air. Nathan followed but kept distance between them, feeling the sharpness of the wind but focused solely on her. "I do not know how to be loved anymore," she whispered into the night. "I have forgotten how." He stepped closer, his voice low. "Then let me teach you." She closed her eyes, shaking her head. "It is not that simple. My life is complicated, my daughter." "I know," he said softly, "and I am not afraid of any part of it." She turned then, her face streaked with tears, her eyes full of years of pain and longing. "Why?" she whispered. "Why me?" He stared at her, his expression breaking open with an honesty he had never allowed himself before. "Because," he said, "I have spent too many years surrounded by people who want my power, my name, my wealth, my influence. But you only ever wanted me, the boy under the oak tree, the one who did not know who he would become. You knew me before I became anything at all, and you are the only person who ever saw me without all the armor." Her breath shattered into a soft, broken sound. He took another step. "You make me want to be gentle," he whispered, "and I have forgotten how." That confession unraveled her. She pressed a hand to her mouth, trying not to cry too loudly, and he reached out very slowly, giving her the chance to step away. She did not. Her fingers slipped into his, fragile and trembling. He lifted her hand to his chest, placing it over his heartbeat. "This," he whispered, "has been yours since the day you left." And she broke. She leaned into him, finally letting herself fold into the warmth she had denied for so many years. He held her carefully, tenderly, not claiming, not gripping, only offering a safe place for her to rest. Her tears soaked into his shirt, and he closed his eyes, pressing his cheek to her hair as though anchoring himself to the woman he had lost once and vowed never to lose again. When she finally pulled back, her breath shaky, she whispered the words she had kept buried for years. "I did not deserve you then, but I want to try to deserve you now." He shook his head softly. "You already do." Days passed, and something between them shifted, no longer fragile like glass but steady like a slow-burning flame. They fell into routines that felt natural, almost dangerous in their simplicity. Nathan began making breakfast. Leah began humming again. Lucy began calling him something she never had before. "Family." The first time she said it, Nathan froze. Leah's eyes widened, her breath catching. Lucy looked at both of them with innocent affection, unaware of the earthquake her single word had caused. But Nathan's heart did not break, it opened. He knelt beside her and whispered, "Yes, we are." Spring approached. The snow melted from the window edges, revealing softer skis above the city. One sunny morning, Nathan invited Leah and Lucy to the small conservatory garden atop the building. Flowers bloomed there, protected from winter by glass and heat. Lucy spun in circles, giggling. Leah walked quietly beside him, the sunlight catching in her hair. "Do you remember," he asked, "when you told me you forgot how to hope?" She nodded, her eyes soft. He took her hand gently. "Then let me remind you." He reached into his pocket and took out a small folded square of pale blue cloth. Her breath halted. "You kept it," she whispered. "I never let it go," he said, "just like you." She touched the handkerchief with trembling fingers, tears swelling in her eyes. "I thought you would have thrown it away." "I could never throw away the last piece of the girl I loved." Her tears spilled freely now. "And what about the woman I am now?" she whispered. He cupped her cheek with such tenderness she almost collapsed. "The woman you are now," he murmured, "is even stronger than the girl I once loved, because she survived everything that should have broken her." She leaned into his hand, closing her eyes. When she opened them again, something inside her had changed. She was no longer running. He kissed her then, softly, reverently, like a man kissing a memory that had finally returned to him in the flesh. Her hands rose to his shoulders, uncertain at first, then steady as she kissed him back with years of longing pressed into a single moment. The world softened around them, the conservatory filled with the quiet hum of life. Their daughter's laughter echoed in the background. Nathan pulled away, only enough to rest his forehead against hers. "You are home," he whispered. And for the first time in her life, she believed it. Not because he saved her, not because he offered shelter, but because he offered something far rarer. A place to begin again. Lucy ran to them, arms outstretched, and they gathered her in with laughter and tears, three fragile hearts stitched slowly into something whole. Sometimes the love we bury the deepest is the one that finds its way back through every storm, every scar, every silence. And sometimes the life meant for us returns the moment we finally stop running from it. Their story did not end there, it began there. A broken girl who learned to hope. A lonely man who learned to feel again. A little girl who brought them both home. And a love that found its way back after years of darkness, proving once more that even the quietest hearts can rise again.